we're gonna get right into the nuts and bolts a little bit this morning. One of the things that we talk about in Extension at the local level is our program delivery, and of course program delivery comes from a couple directions, but one of them underlying all of our efforts is the fiscal component. Where do the resources come from that allow us to move the research-based educational programming from campus out to where it belongs and with the citizens of Missouri? Our funding comes from a number of different sources, and the way we utilize those is something that most of us have a very, very, very shallow and very cursory understanding of. So we're going to start this morning. Dr. Stewart's going to run through the nuts and bolts, kind of where the money comes from, and what we do with it, and how we utilize that capacity and the impact of it.
And good morning. Good morning. I want to first of all say a few words about HC. He's very modest, and I want you to understand a little bit more about HC, and then I'm going to talk about my stuff. HC has represented the University of Missouri for the last several years with something called CARET, and that's not carrot like you eat, that's C-A-R-E-T, the Council for Academic Research, Agriculture Research, Extension, and Teaching, and that's a national group. And several years ago, he was asked by the University of Missouri to be our rep on that, to represent nationally and federally extension funding. A lot of people don't know that unless you're on the state council. You probably don't know that, but especially those that are sort of watching from afar, you need to know that this 3 weeks ago, HC was elected to be on the national board of that group, and you may have seen that, and we need to give HC a round of applause. That's a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is obviously it speaks well of his leadership, but it puts us in the University of Missouri, and in particular in Extension, having someone that is now at the seat of the table from a federal advocacy standpoint. And that is incredibly hard to get, and it's incredibly important to have. So no pressure, HC, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the old style today. You're not going to get a PowerPoint from me. I think it's better if I draw this for you. And so I hope you'll hang in here with me. I don't promise that my artwork is the best, but I think it does tell you the story in a way that can hopefully help you understand the streams of funds, where they come from, and then understand how we use those, and then understand the impact it has. And I've found that if I can break this down for folks, it makes it a lot easier for you at the county, state, or federal level, wherever your relationships may be, for you to have the opportunity to talk about that. So that's what we're going to do. So you're going to direct your attention over here, but I think all of you know that in 1914, there was something called the Smith-Lever Act. The Smith-Lever Act is what federalized extension. Up until then, you had land-grant universities. The land-grant universities were the Land-Grant Act, which was really the Morrill Act. Abraham Lincoln, 1862. Created the Land-Grant Act, and what it did was it said to universities that were existing or to universities that could exist that we're going to have a land grant in every state. And people sometimes wonder, what does a land grant mean? It means there was land somewhere, federal land, that the United States owned, and what they did is they said, we're going to give you this chunk of land, and you can take that land and sell it, and when you sell it, the proceeds of that land, of that sale, will come back to your state to form the land grant, hence the word land grant. Now, a lot of people don't even know that. They think, what does that mean? That's where it really comes from. So there was land sold, federal land, state of Missouri got the proceeds. They decided, unlike some other states, to put it in the existing university we now know as the University of Missouri, because in 1839 this institution had been established. But what it brought into that were sort of the technical side of what you see at the institution. It brought agriculture. It brought, in the South, you will find colleges of textiles. It brought those kinds of disciplines in. So it was to really sweep into these institutions and make the public universities not for the elite, but for, quote unquote, of that day, the common man. Now we would say common man or woman. So does that make sense? Is that helpful? And I think sometimes we kind of, those of us in these roles kind of glaze over that. You hear us talk about land grant and all this stuff, and you wonder, what does all that mean? Well, that's a little bit of history because it sets context, because when that happened, then they set up something through those called the Ag Experiment Stations. We have Ag Research Centers here. Y'all know about those. We have a ton of them here. A really great network of those through CAFNR. That's where that idea came from, because the idea was to take the research and to have it in these stations all over. We call them stations in North Carolina. You call them centers here. You probably called them stations here at one time, because that's historically what they were called, was research stations, and it put them all over the state. Some states have lots of them. The reason Missouri has so many is you can grow so much different stuff here. So you need these farms so you can prototype or test things around the state. Some states, if you're in states that they just grow one type of crop or they have very few crops, you won't find as many research stations. Here you got a lot of them, and that's why. So pretty much in any region of the state in Missouri, you're going to find those. Well, all of that comes out of that if you go all the way back to that land grant. Actually, in the late 1800s, there was also something called the Hatch Act, and that actually put federal money into those. But really what I want to focus on today is this thing called extension, because in 1914, Smith Lever, that's a senator out of Georgia and a senator out of South Carolina, or representative out of South Carolina, came together, and they put together what's called the Smith-Lever Act. Smith-Lever Act put in place what we call the federal funds for extension. So when we say federal funds, we're talking about Smith-Lever money. And that was 1914. We're in 2017. That money still flows. That's pretty powerful. That makes a strong statement, because what it says is that grassroots people like you over those years have continued to advocate for those, and you've said they're important, and therefore they still exist. That is all wrapped up in the Farm Bill. So every 5 years, Farm Bill comes up for reauthorization. That's where that money is. If you ever wonder, it's all out of USDA. It's all out of there. Now, it's also important to note that Smith-Lever Act was really about extending the university, and it wanted to target those things that were those folks that were in most dire need of help at the time from the university. Now, think about 1914. What do you think it was like? It was tough in rural America, right? So what they decided is we're going to really focus in agriculture, ultimately youth development, nutrition type, home economics back in those days. Those became the programs that got that. But it's also important to note that Smith-Lever Act, its intent was that the institution extend. And at that time, that was the audience they targeted. But today we have audiences in urban. We have audiences in suburban. There's needs a lot of places. So that's why you see urban extension. That's why you see us doing great things in St. Louis and Kansas City. It doesn't all have to be agriculture, but it certainly is a part of the portfolio. It will always be a big part of the portfolio. So let's talk about those funds. State of Missouri, and I will draw you some boxes here. This first box represents $10 million. That's how much we get in the state of Missouri. This is Missouri's take. Now you might say, how is that decided? Well, it's pretty much been same or similar number for years because it's a formula. You will hear federal folks talk about formula funding. The formula is basically set on the number of small farms you have. That's the biggest calculator. There's other things in there too, but that's the one to remember. Guess what Missouri has a lot of? Small farms. Second highest in the country. Therefore, we are second or third highest in the country in terms of our federal Smith-Lever money. Texas is more, but they should be because they're a bigger state. We're number 2 though. So when you look at this, Missouri gets $10 million, and this is your Smith-Lever funds. This is your federal. This is federal funds up here at this top. Now when we get those funds, then part of what the states are required to do is to do some kind of match or to put funds in to at least say, okay, we're going to put in this, and then you got to come put some in too. So the next thing that happens is it comes down to the state level. And at the state level, we get somewhere, and this flows through the university, but it usually is around 26, 25 million. It's usually in that range somewhere. And what happens in the state of Missouri is that comes in as a university allocation. The university then says historically this is kind of what you've had, your benchmark, and so they move that into our budget. So 10 million begets, and this is state level. This is what you'd call the state investment. This is $26 million here. So suddenly you can see I got 10, and now I've got about 36 million, right? Now the next thing that happens is I go down here. This is where a lot of you work and are involved with us every day, which is at the county level. You all have heard the term cooperative extension, right? They don't use it a lot here, but in some states that's used heavily. The cooperative line in that is cooperation between the county, the state, and the federal. At this level in the state of Missouri, we have about 6 million, and this is the county. This is the county investment. Now, this number here is all over the board in terms of other states. Some states, I can take you to some states that are in the 20 million plus range. I can take you to some states that are in the 15 million range. I can tell you that 6 million, counties are getting a pretty good deal from us, to be honest with you, with what they get. But if you add all this up, let's just take 10, 36 now, and up to 6, you're a little over $40 million. And again, that may fluctuate a little bit, but that's pretty much. Does that make sense? Everybody still with me? So I'm trying to break it out for you. Then what happens is you start walking this way. We take all this 40 million roughly, and I'm just going to put an average of about 40 mil, and we create out of that about 84 million. And the way we do that is we have contracts, we have grants like FNEP and SNAP-Ed, we have all kinds of funds coming in for different programs we do in nutrition, in 4-H, in agriculture, and other things. So what we do is we take this 40 and we double it, more than double it. And this becomes the investment in Missouri. So this 84 million is what we invest every year in the state of Missouri for extension from the University of Missouri. Now that's a lot of money where I'm from. How about y'all? Y'all think that's a lot of money? Well, let me show you the best part of the story. The best part of the story is we take this 84, and what do you think that 84 becomes in terms of impact? Anybody got an idea? Well, we didn't know either until this year, because as a part of our planning process, we brought in a group to kind of look at our metrics and to go in and dig into our data and look at our impact in agriculture, in nutrition, human development, community development, business development, 4-H, all of our program areas. And what we found was, what they found for us, and this is a group that does this nationally for USDA, they also do it for other states. We had just never had this done here. This 84 million, which all started with this 10 million, in the state of Missouri becomes this, $945 million. And this is our impact. This is the impact in local communities in the state of Missouri. Now you show me anywhere that you can take $10 and make $945 out of it, if you want to break it down that way. Pretty good value. Now one of the things that we want you all to understand, and HC's going to come back in a moment, is it's really important that we have advocacy at this level. This is federal. You've got to have advocacy here at state. That's why it's important to go to legislative day and know your legislator, even more importantly, locally. It's really important because they need to understand that if they cut the university, this is in danger. So let's say the university takes a 10% cut. Well, that gets cut 10%. So they need to understand that this is not a separate line. It is a part of the overall university budget. And then this down here where you work with your county commissioners, county councils working with county commissioners, this needs to stay strong and grow, hopefully. This number actually in the state of Missouri is ticking up a little bit, which is a really good sign for me, and I like to see that. But this really here is all of our advocacy. If we advocate well here, we can take our 40 million, create 84 million in contracts and grants, and all of it together, and create $94 million worth of value. Does that make sense? Now, I didn't use a PowerPoint. I know some people are crazy about PowerPoints, but I hope this is helpful. Does this make it very clear? Now, there's a lot of other things that we get. You know, we get, if you go to the county level, what's not in this 6 million necessarily is there's a lot of things that they do, and they're supportive, and they help with lots of things. So I don't want to in any way say there's not other things. University, for instance, I'm in Whitten Hall. I don't pay rent to be in Whitten Hall, and those kind of things. So there's some other things that help us, don't get me wrong. But it's really important. You can pretty much say 10 million begets 26 million, 25, 26 million, begets with county 84 million, begets $945 million. And that to me is about as simple as you can break this thing down. And I hope that's helpful to you, because as HC comes back, he's going to talk more about some things we'd like for you to help us do in advocacy and how we really want to be thoughtful. One of the things I'll leave you with is it's important that you understand this. Behind all this information, this is just a number that I can use. But each one of you have a story that explains that number. And it's really important that you know your story. What does this 945 mean in your life or in someone in your community's life? How did it help someone on their farm? How did it help a 4-H'er go to college? What did it do to help somebody lift themselves out of poverty into prosperity? Those are stories that tell the narrative about why this is important in the state of Missouri, and this is just Missouri. Now think about multiplying that across 50 states and the impact land-grant universities have across that whole system. I'm going to stop there. I'll be back with you a little bit later, and certainly I'll take questions on the breaks and stuff. HC, I'm going to have you come back and pick it up there.
Thank you, Marshall. It was imperative that Dr. Stewart handled that this morning because it involved math and artistry. How many times do you get the academic side with the artistic side all rolled into the same package? We were very fortunate to have his leadership there.
I was looking for the flip chart. Come on.
Flip chart and with adhesive on the back is the extension way, I realize, but we're going to be a little less mobile with that. So I want to go back to a couple of the numbers just from a starting point. We've talked about, Dr. Stewart's talked about all three of these things. Most of us at the county level are involved in our county council budget that we provide to our county commissioners, and our county commissioners are our greatest local partner. They help us keep the door open and the lights on. With our state, many of us have had interaction at the state level many times through our legislative day, contact with our legislators locally. Those numbers are somewhat obscure to most of us because when we talk to our legislators at legislative day, we seldom have this number. We're advocating then for all of Missouri public higher education because the University of Missouri's budget is a part of the higher education bill. So what we're asking for help then is a bill that's somewhere close to $800 million, and this is Extension's portion of that 800. About half of that, actually it's probably a little less than that with some cuts recently, but about half of that goes to the University of Missouri system, about half of that goes to the University of Missouri Columbia, and out of that, this is the part that comes to Extension. So that's the chain of where that stuff comes. But as Dr. Stewart said, we're going to talk about the 10 a little bit today. That 10 number's been about the same for a couple of decades. And I don't know about where you live, but where I live, we've had a thing called inflation. Now, for those of you that are as old as me, you realize that inflation we've had recently is minuscule compared to what we lived through in the 70s and 80s. But if we keep this $10 million for the next couple of decades, I did a little math using a calculator, of course. I projected a 2% inflation for the next 20 years. If our number of 10 million stays static, purchasing power in today's numbers comes to about $6.8 million. What we see is that the stagnant number in our budget ask at the federal level is not good enough. It does not help us meet our It does not help us meet our mission. We're going to need help to move that forward, and that's kind of what I'm asking for today is a little bit of help. And I want to explain to you kind of the way we hope to see that come. The National Institute of Food and Agriculture is part of the USDA, called the abbreviation or the acronym for that is NIFA. The NIFA budget that this 10 comes out of is a little over $1 billion, and that's spread not only with the extension of the Smith Lever and everything that Marshall went through, that's through a whole gamut of stuff that's far more complex than we're going to get into today. But just remember, this $10 million is Missouri Extension's take out of what starts off at about $1 billion. This last year at the federal level, we asked for an increase of $200 million, which would have been just under a 10% increase. 10%, ones and zeros are easy for me to manage. If we were able to obtain that and the formula stayed fairly constant, we could look at moving this number by 20%, which would be, think about the multiplication and the matching and the economic impact that could be. That's why asking for a little bit more resource, or at least something that will start to move us toward keeping pace with inflation, is imperative to our land grant mission at the local level. That's why when we ask for a bodacious number of $200 million on top of $1 billion at the federal level, that's why it matters to us. That's what's meaningful to us, and that's why we want to ask for that. So how do we ask for that? Well, first of all, let me back up a minute. And realistically, I know some of you called on legislators. You've been in the county, in the state capitol. You ask for support. People are polite. Everybody has interchange. We leave there, in some of our interactions, we don't know if we made a difference. We don't know if it matters. And so when we talk about this stuff at the federal level and we make this plea to our congressional delegation, We don't know how that's going to end, and we don't know where it's going. But I do firmly believe this, that it is incumbent upon our mission for us to ask. We have a responsibility to share our story and to make sure our federal partners understand the need and the impact of the programming and where those resources go. So back to that ask. We're going to, Marshall alluded to the CARET organization. We're going to ask for, I'm here today introducing a program. We're going to ask for a county support person from every county in the state. Each of our county councils, we're going to ask to have a person designated on that county to be that federal advocacy partner with us. And I will share the information needed and work through them to try to make that difference. Here's what we're asking for that person. Now let me back up. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to call that person. We thought about calling them the county CARET. We thought about calling them the Mo CARET, the More CARET. I'm not sure. We don't have a name yet. We don't know what we're going to call that person yet. But we're going to call them something good. What we want that person to do, first of all, we want them to make contact with our federal delegation, our federal congressional and Senate delegation. You've all heard the political term, all politics is local. Well, I know you'll be shocked to know this, but when I call on a congressman in St. Louis or Kansas City, they don't really care. I mean, it's not that they don't care, but they don't have time for me. I am not part of their constituency. We need people local. We need people in their districts to explain why this is important to them. So we're going to ask that person at the county level to get acquainted with their congressional office. Most of the time they're going to be dealing with staffers. We want them to get acquainted with the staff, find out who's there, who's local, how many people they have in the office. In the Northeast region we're working with today, we have two U.S. congressmen. One of them has about 90% of the counties, and I'll think of his name in a moment, Northwest. Sam Graves, yes. I called Sam Graves' office. They were polite. They want to talk to me, but I don't live in Sam Graves' district. We need somebody that lives in Sam Graves' district. We know he has 3 offices, Kansas City, St. Joe, and Hannibal. A lot of daylight, a lot of real estate between them. These people are covering a lot of ground. We need somebody to contact them, find out, and here's what we want. First of all, find out what we can do to help them. When will you need information? What can we do to help you? How do we get in touch with you? Who's in charge of your scheduling? How do we work together for this mission to serve the citizens of Missouri? Next, we're going to ask for, we want somebody to be able to make invitations to extension events, and predominantly events that are ongoing. We all have the county fairs, recognition nights for 4-H, annual meetings. All of those are normal, and we send invitations to those already. We want somebody that can dig a little deeper and find out when they're in the district, when they're back in their district, and ask if there's things in extension program they would like to see. The nuts and bolts of what's going on, the real delivery of program education at the local level, things that make that type of impact that Dr. Stewart mentioned earlier. A critical part of that is engagement with our faculty. There's already, our administration asks our faculty to have similar contact with those congressional officers. But also our faculty, our county program directors, they need our help. They need somebody else with boots on the ground that can ask questions that are not exactly appropriate for university employees. So we need that. So this is most definitely a joint effort. When we're making invitations, that person will need, our county person will need to collaborate and do that in conjunction with their county office, with their faculty member, their county program director, so that we're working together as a unified message and cooperating between the county and our faculty and our program directors and our council members. The next thing we're going to do is so the first thing, contact, and the next thing is invitation, and the third part of that is advocacy. From an advocacy standpoint, most of us don't follow the USDA budget process real closely. It is a monster. If I just told you the NIFA portion's $1 billion, all the ag programs are another big number that I don't know off the top of my head, but all of those are dwarfed by the SNAP program. So the complexity of that is far beyond most of our understanding, and we don't have the time to devote to that to stay up with it anyway. But our federal partners through NIFA gives us updates and information, and that part comes just through the chain of communication. Comes to me, and also comes to Dr. Stewart. We're going to make a point, make sure we deliver that information to the people at the county level, those people we've designated or that have volunteered to fill that role in federal advocacy. So what do they do with that information? 2 things. First of all, I hope they will share it at the county level. Hope they share it with the county committee. the county council. The second thing we want them to do is, on occasion, there will be a request for a voice or for a contact from us asking for support of our initiative. In this instance, it would have been in support of the increase in funding, federal funding through the Farm Bill to NIFA. When that comes, we hope that person not only will act upon that request for advocacy, but will also share that with the rest of their county council. Let me go back to sharing with the county council a minute. We all come to extension councils from a different place. We're part of the body at large, our citizens. We're not all the same. I will have to tell you that the first time I came to a county council meeting, if somebody had asked me to call my congressman and ask for money, I'm not sure I would have been back for the next meeting. Not all county council members come in from the same place. Not all of them have the same expectation or the same engagement with extension programming. And with most of us, that evolves over time when we learn more about the impact and about the effect that education has at the county level. So when I say we're asking for people for county help, most definitely. When I want that person to also engage with their county council members, I want them to find them where they are. We're not looking to push people into this. We want them this to be a task that they can look forward to. I'm not saying be comfortable with, because a lot of us aren't exactly comfortable contracting congressional offices. But I want them to be something that they're willing to look at and willing to take part in. One of the underlying challenges that we have in county councils is we have term limits. Each year when we establish a new county council and we have our new people, we hope that we have a person as part of their normal slate of officers. They come up with a person to help us at the federal level with the funding advocacy. The people, whoever they choose, there's chances are they're going to be term limited off. One of the things we haven't done a particularly good job, we keep working at it, but we haven't found the way to do it best yet, I don't think, is to keep people that are term limited out, keep them engaged in our county councils and our and advocacy at the county level for extension. What I'm going to ask is that while if somebody's served in that federal capacity and they get term limited off, the county may have another person selected on their county to help with that and to make those invitations and make those contacts. But I want the advocacy component of that third leg, that advocacy component, I want to maintain those people in the fold. I want to keep their contact information. I want to keep them in the chain of information and advocacy role that goes on. So my hope is that where we start, granted in Missouri we have 114 counties, I can tell you with some confidence that 3 months from now, when we have some of this up and running, I'm going to be surprised if we have 114 people designated. I don't see it coming together that fast. But I'd like to envision that 5 years from now, we'll have 200 instead of 114, because we've been able to maintain contact and keep that advocacy role and message and mission alive in those that have term limited off. I'll be sharing contact information with you when, as Bob mentioned, we're going to be sending out the program information to those that are watching by live stream or by recording, and the information we send out, we're going to get contact information out to you. Initially, we're asking that the contact information for people that your counties can designate to fill this federal role will end up coming to me, and whether that comes directly to me and I share it and get some administrative assistance in maintaining the database, or whether it goes there and comes back to me. You understand the university doesn't ask for money, at least officially. That's what we're here for. So the nuts and bolts of how we work through that, we don't have all of that ironed out yet, but in the next 30 days we're going to have that out in writing. We're going to have a plan in place. And so this was the first opportunity we had to show up and ask for help. It's almost like church. I'm not passing a plate now, but I'm asking you to take a plate with you and be prepared to help us ask when the time is right a little later on. Any questions? I'm going to be out and around. Yes, Sam.
How does what you've just outlined, and help us out here, what kind of a acronym or description do you want us to refer to this program? What's your choice so we can talk about it?
We've talked, Marcia and I talked very, very briefly, and we talked about a county carrot delegate, county carrot appointee. County
Okay,
carrot.
how does county care, in a statewide sense, relate to the abolition of the University of Missouri System's outreach program, the program headed by Steve Norm earlier this year? That whole organization of advocates was eliminated under the budget crunch.
That's
So
correct.
is this trying to step up and somewhat replace that?
In all honesty, those two processes were not part of the discussion as being independent or be a replacement of other. The suggestion for this actually evolved out of a meeting this summer. We received a request. Your statement about the Federal Government Relations Office being dissolved.
It wasn't just federal government relations, it was the overall community.
Right, at the state level as well. Yeah, you're right.
And those folks came down to the county level. We had Steve Norm here to speak. And
Yes.
he was, of course, the head of that department that
Yep.
advocated in Jeff City and Washington. So
That's correct.
and they're all gone now. So
And how
this is a
we're,
replacement.
this is not the replacement, but this is another arrow in the quiver. This is another tool. This is another point of contact we're hoping to evolve. Where this kind of evolved, we got one of these requests from funding from NIFA asking for support. It came through the chain of communication. It came to me as a carrot delegate. It came to Dr. Stewart as the administrative head of extension for the University of Missouri. We both responded to it, and then we were on our way to a meeting. We got visiting about it, and we both got talking about it. We kind of dropped the ball. We should have forwarded that. We should have gotten more people. We should have shared that more broadly. So we talked about that briefly in the car on the way to this meeting. Then we get to the meeting, and one of the prime topics at the meeting was what a less than desirable response that request had. And so we were starting to think, we missed an opportunity. And my first thought was I should have at least shared that with the State Extension Council, and then thought, maybe with regional council administration as well, regional council leadership as well. As we talk about it further, Dr. says, well, why are we stopping at those levels? Why aren't we engaged at the county level where we really need to be? And that's how that's kind of the evolution of where we came together with this. It wasn't necessarily in response to those offices no longer being available to us, but it's we certainly hope it can make a difference.
Thank you.
Other questions? With that, I'm going to turn back over to Bob. He's going to get us back on track. And again, thanks for being here. One thing I will throw out in the planning for this event, I wanted to at least say one brief thing. Bob did a lot of the heavy lifting with the planning committee. Two people that are not part of this region that also were very instrumental at the state level. We had on the planning committee was Vern Windsor from the urban region on the west side of the state. And Paul Klausner, I saw Paul a minute ago, on the west side of the state. When we had meetings planning this thing, both of those guys drove from the opposite sides of the state to meet with us a number of times and help put this together. They were both also instrumental in planning the Council to Campus event that preceded this event. So their history, their context, their understanding, their knowledge of the nuts and bolts it took to put that together were also instrumental, and their commitment and sacrifice to the amount of time they spent driving here and helping us with it is also very meaningful. So I wanted to make sure you knew that we're doing this in the Northeast region, but this was truly an effort by people from multiple parts of the state.
HC, before you leave.
Yes.
To define into CARET stands for and
Council on Agriculture, Research, Extension, and Teaching.
teaching.
Thank you.